All right. I put the first one up, now the second one, which was the blocking approval. So Pedro and I met about blocking approvals last week to go over some of the problem validation work that he had done. Agenda and some notes from that conversation are down below, and there's a recording on YouTube. I think I put this one on here. I know, Pedro, we ran way over last time, and I think there were things we wanted to follow up on. I'm not clear on what they are. There is 2 bolded asks. And so I just want to make sure, is the last one is the only ask, or was there anything else that you recall that we needed to follow up
on? Yeah, I bolded that one today because I was looking through the agendas and I was also trying to understand what was the action point, but we were already over time. Yeah, I think those are the only 2. So the first one is something that we can try to work and experiment and see if it helps mitigate some of that problem of clearly informing other stakeholders about my stance towards these changes. And the blocking merge is, yeah, I think we need to understand if people are using the all discussions must be resolved option or not, and if they're not using it, why they're not using it. Because I think that's the biggest problem. I don't think, I mean, approvals is related, but I don't think it's necessarily the problem. But anyway, yeah, I think you can ask about approvals as well. And let's see what people say. That issue has a lot of people, hundreds of participants, and I'm not sure what will be the signal to noise ratio. But yeah, we can try it and see what we get. Worst case scenario, we select a few of those participants and customers that we know and ask them directly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That was my understanding as well, was just follow up on the one about controls that are in place and whether or not people are using on it. And then I know you had mentioned trying to schedule some interviews with people. I think we can do that too, depending on how that comes back. I think we just need a little more data there. So we'll try that. Okay. This one I just tossed on here too, the reporter permissions. I linked to the issue where this came up, and this is sort of the second one that has come up around permissions. We had some other conversations about permissions recently. I think less about this one. I guess I was more wondering, or less about the specifics of whether or not a reporter should be able to resolve their own threads. I was more curious, had we given much thought to whether or not reporters or guests should even be allowed to comment in merge requests at all, based on the way that we phrase it in the handbook, where we say that, like, which this took a while to find, which is reporters are read-only contributors. They can't write to the repository, but can on issues, which is complicated because we use sort of one set of permissions for commenting in general across merge requests and issues and epics. But I would agree probably that if we think reporters should be able to comment on a merge request, they should probably be able to resolve their own threads, because no one else can resolve, like, everyone else has that capability. So that makes sense. I think my question is more like, was that the right permission there to begin with? And I don't know if anyone has ever thought about reporters in merge requests. And by anyone, largely I mean you, Pedro.
Yeah, I mean, Annabelle, you've been here longer than me, so maybe you have some thoughts as well. But I think that I don't think there's a problem with leaving comments. A potential problem can arise when those comments block merge requests, which they do by default. And that's the other issue or problem that I highlighted, blocking versus non-blocking threads. And today they're blocking by default. And there's a need even for, in a normal feedback and review space where you have two developers, the author and the reviewer. The reviewer might want to leave a comment that is non-blocking, and that doesn't even need to be resolved. It's just a general comment. So yeah, I think they should be able to comment. I saw, I think, one or two users or customers mentioning that they have guests and or reporters coming in and leaving comments on merge requests. I don't think that's a problem. I agree that guests and reporters are more read-only in the sense that they're not contributing changes to the repository. But I think in the same way that let's imagine like they have an external member who's a reporter, and they report a bug, and the developer creates a merge request to address that bug, and the reporter can then review that merge request and provide some feedback. Hey, this is working, this is addressing my need or not. I think if we block that behavior, it wouldn't be so good, because they would now have to go back to the issue to leave comments on the merge request that they can see. So I think if they can see something, they should be able to comment on it. The problem is when they block it, which is, if it's a bridge that we will have to cross at some point. But I think it's separate from this specific issue that you linked to.
Okay. And then I think all that makes sense. I think logically I can see through, like, I mean, I imagine in some companies, PMs are reporters. If I had to think about how they might dole out permissions. And so that makes sense that they might comment in a merge request.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Yeah.
What I'm understanding is that when a reporter reports a bug and there's a merge request, if they comment on that report, the merge request can no longer be merged without addressing that comment. It blocks the actual merge request from being going through.
There's a feature of merge requests, which is that all threads, so all comment chains, have to be resolved. It's as simple as clicking a resolve thread button.
Okay.
And so anyone who can comment on a merge request can leave a comment that, without their thread being resolved, effectively blocks a merge request, assuming a combination of settings exists that actually has that enabled for people.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
On the resolution piece then, and I think I'm on board that a reporter should be able to resolve their own thread, but sort of quickly talking that through, if they can't actually contribute to the code, if they were to leave the essence of them leaving a comment to start a thread, potentially, well, I guess they can't resolve any threads, but I guess what role is the reporter playing to resolve threads? If we assume threads are related to pieces of code, although you could create a thread that's just sort of arbitrarily in the merge request too. Is that the right role for that role to be playing in the merge request? Like, would you want to, again, let's assume a PM is a reporter in other companies. Like, would I go through and resolve threads? Like, I'm trying to just think through that to make sure that, like, because this, I mean, on the one hand, like, I think this is being reported as I guess it's a feature request. But changing permissions is one man's feature request and one man's bug. One person's, as we've seen with some other permission changes we've made. So I don't know. I just like thinking through that. Does that make sense for that role? Or I know you said yes already, but sort of interesting to talk about.
You mean to resolve all threads or just their own threads?
It's interesting because we don't have a control in place that allows you to specify that you could only resolve your own threads. We only have the ability that you can either resolve threads or can't resolve threads. So if you were thinking of a new control that was like, you could only resolve your own threads.
Yeah, I think, that's what would make sense for guests and reporters. I think it would be, too much power for a reporter or a guest to resolve other people's threads in a merge request, given that they can be blocking, right? So if someone brings up, a security analyst brings up a critical security vulnerability, and they say, hey, this must be fixed before this goes in. If a guest comes in and resolves it, or a reporter, it might be missed by the developer, and they don't have a chance to address it. But if they can resolve their own threads, I think that might be acceptable. But as you said, we don't have that today.
So from what I understand, are we talking about two different things? Either guests and reporters are able to resolve their own threads and only theirs, or are we talking about making threads created by guests and reporters non-blocking by default? So they can comment all over, they can do what they want, they can't resolve it, but it doesn't matter because it's not blocking.
Yeah, it's so those two things, exactly. And the second one, their threads blocking or not, is we'd have to look into it, because some teams might say, oh, but we have reporters and guests in our projects that we want their threads to block because of XYZ. I don't know. So that's a separate thing that exists, and we would have to look into it. But the issue that was opened 3 weeks ago was about the ability for reporters or guests to resolve their own threads.
Okay. And right now they can't.
No, they can't. Okay. They can create threads in merge requests. They are resolvable. They block. They can potentially block the merge request depending if the project has the allow all discussions to be must be resolved. And they can't resolve it. So they have to wait for someone that is a developer, maintainer, or owner to resolve them. I mean, if we want to take some inspiration from the approval feature, you can only, and Amy, I don't know if you're still on the call, but you've been working on, or you worked recently on the documentation for approvals. If I'm not mistaken, you can only approve if you're a developer or higher in role. I don't know. I don't think reporters can approve, right?
Talking about for the default, any eligible user rule?
I mean, even
rule.
if you add them specifically to a rule, I don't think they need to have developer or higher permission. So if you add a guest or a reporter to a specific approval rule, they cannot approve. I think that's is that correct, Amy? Actually, Yeah, I'm seeing in the documentation now. Let me paste that in the chat. Apparently you can add them. Something called
Got it.
merge request approval segregation of duties. You may need to grant users with reporter permission to approve merge requests before they can merge to a protected branch. Some users, like managers, may not need permission to push or merge, but still need oversight on proposed work. And you can
This was done by CI, or actually this was done by release for environments. I know where this feature came from.
yeah, so
And I dropped in a link that states it a little more clearly. We should probably, sorry, just not going to say that. The following users can approve merge requests if they have developer or higher permissions. Users added as approvers at the project or merge request level, or users who are code owners of the files. It's complicated.
So yeah, in addition to that, a reporter can approve if the project is shared with a group that has that person as a reporter. So it's complicated, but I think it's fair to say that by default, and unless you have to do all of these things, reporters cannot approve and cannot be added to an approval rule.
So what's broken with the status quo right now is that there's some inefficiency with reporters not being able to close their own threads, right? So we have to weigh the development cost of adding some new functionality there versus how long it takes somebody to go and resolve that thread.
Yes, and also us discussing it here now. That's also a cost.
Great.
Yes, I appreciate all the indulgence on my permissions venture that I've been on as we've worked through more and more permissions issues recently. So
This is somewhat related, but I still think that the conventional comments is the coolest thing. If we were able to, like, if someone started typing non-blocking and we had like a little tag that popped up or something and you could click it and it would make that thread non-blocking and you keep going, or praise. I hate that right now if someone's like, praise, I love what you did here, this makes sense. And then they comment and then they immediately resolve it because it's like, I don't want to block this. So here's your praise, no one can see it. It'd just be nice if we could make some threads non-blocking that way.
So resolving it hides it somehow?
Yeah.
Mm.
But you can
It-
still see it, it just collapses it. And the person will still probably see it. It's just kind of a silly flow.
Well, is this something that we should do research on?
Don't worry, Ben. I think we have more important things for you to work on.
Okay, great.
But thanks for asking. Yeah, I'm inclined to keep this in the backlog and waiting for more people to respond with their use cases. But yeah, I don't see this as a very
I would
important
agree.
thing.
All I'm going to do, I'm going to like rewrite the issue to make it more clear about some of those things that we discussed, just so if someone does decide to pick it up, or I find the issue again in 6 months, remember what we talked about and why we got to where we were. So yeah, I'm going to rephrase the problem and proposal to be more specific about adding an additional control for like those users to resolve only their own threads, because I think that's sort of the nuance that I had missed before, and I think that makes it more clear. I was thinking resolving all threads, and that felt like a power too far. So that makes sense. Cool. If no one has anything else, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
See ya.
everyone.
Bye bye.